Hey everyone, and welcome to the Better Health Podcast. Today I am with Sara Gross, who is the CEO and founder of Feisty Media. And not only that, but she also competed as a professional triathlete for 14 years and won 2 Ironman titles and 2 major championships. So she's a powerhouse. So it's amazing to have you here, Sara. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, April.
Amazing. So to start us off, I would love to just have you give us some context on where you grew up, where you live now, and a little bit about your background.
Yeah, it's people often ask this question first. It is kind of complex. So I grew up until I was about 13 years old. I grew up in Ontario, Canada, pretty normal North American upbringing. And then my family moved to the Middle East when I was 13 and to a town like outside Dubai in a time when people now Dubai is a cool international city.
Yeah.
Like it was not that then. Right?
You're like, we're going where?
Yeah, exactly. Like the only place we had heard of was Saudi Arabia, which is a completely different country in context, obviously. So I ended up at an international school without hardly any other English speakers around me. It was very interesting, but it did shape my sort of sporting life in a way too, because I had to take up individual sports because girls didn't play sport at the same level that it did. And that's why it's interesting. And then I went to university in Canada and also in Scotland. And that's where I became a professional athlete and spent some time traveling with the sport, taking advantages of the fun parts of being a pro athlete, going around the world to training camps and doing that fun stuff. And then when I retired, I really wanted to do a media project. I'd had some really good experiences with media. I saw the difference that media could make in terms of the way that shifting people's perspectives on things. So I wanted to get involved in that. And then of course I have this like entrepreneurial thread through me. So instead of becoming a journalist or, going down that road and working for someone else, I decided, why not start my own media company?
So
and
cool.
Here we are.
Here we are, and you're on the podcast.
Yes.
Amazing. I love that so much. So what initially got you into fitness, and what did your childhood look like in regards to fitness, and how did you really get involved?
Yeah, I was really lucky because right from the beginning, my dad was very clear on I need to get my daughters in sport. Right. And so we tried a few different things and I really took to soccer. Soccer's a really popular sport where I was universal. From in Canada. Yeah. I think in North America broadly, like women's soccer, I mean, it's amazing. And so I played soccer and then, like I said, moved to the Middle East I also played every other sport at school too. Right. Like I was on the volleyball team and the basketball team and the track team. I did all the things.
All the above.
Yeah. And then I got to this school in United Arab Emirates and just the girls there were some sporty girls, they just didn't have the same experience of sport, like they didn't have the same opportunities, so the level of play was lower than what I was used to. So then I took up swimming on my own and just started running on my own because I needed that, I was used to moving, so I needed to get in the door.
That's pretty awesome. And did you have sisters that, competed alongside you, or were you the only girl?
Yeah, funny. I have one sister who's younger than me, and she's the complete opposite. She just never took to sport. She's very social. She's very laid back, and she just didn't. It wasn't her thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, everyone has their own niche, and yours was the athletic careers.
Right, totally. Although I do think everyone should move. I'm
with you. Even if it's not your thing, you still should get out there.
Is walking your thing? Is something. It's competitive sport is only one way to be physical in the world, right?
Yes, totally. I love that so much. I'm with you 100%. Everyone should be moving to some degree. So tell me a little bit about your media company. What is Feisty and what does it do primarily?
Yeah. So essentially we made it our goal because, small goals, to just sort of change or create an empowering culture for active women. Right. So that's both within our organization. I have about 10 employees now, creating that empowering culture, and also externally, how can we empower women? Because we talk about that a lot. I think almost too much, but how can we create and shift the culture that's going to support that empowerment? How do we create the empowering culture? So that's essentially our goal. And the way that we do that, we have 8 podcasts now. We
Wow.
have events, like I think we're going to talk later about our performance summit. We have a menopause summit. We have a triathlon summit. And then we also have membership groups for folks who want to take a deeper dive, like who maybe listen to the podcast, but want to get more expert advice monthly through membership programs and stuff like that. So that's kind of how we've done it so far. Yeah.
That's cool. So it's really all about how to empower women. And so is it specifically like I think you said 8 podcasts that there are they all pertaining to fitness, or, are there different topics and genres?
Yeah. So we started in triathlon, which is like super niche, but that was our home. Like I was a professional triathlete, we started doing live coverage of the Ironman World Championships and interviewing all the pro women. And that's kind of where we started. And then we kind of like, as we grew, or as we're growing, kind of realized that like we wanted to find quality information for all active women, because if you look, like the fitness industry and diet industry are just filled with bullshit. Like, sorry, am I like,
no worries.
Swear on your podcast? Like, it's like we're just getting so much bad advice that we thought, okay, how can we figure out how to get good advice based on good science to women who want to be active or who want to sort of like thrive throughout their lifetime, without like just, and they're like essentially like digging through the bullshit. So yes, like we're in the process of expanding. Like we have a very big cycling brand as well. So we have a lot of endurance athletes still in our communities. But also we have, we see people show up now to our summits, like who are like, I just enjoy hiking, but I don't know how to figure out some of the days that I feel like crap, or how to use my cycle to help, or how to eat with my cycle, or how to survive menopause and still get out the door, like these kinds of things.
Totally. One of my first interviews that I actually released back in season 1 was with Dasha Maximov, and it was all around women's research and how most of the research studies out there pertain to men. And if there are women in it, a lot of them end up leaving because they get pregnant. So it's not really applicable, and they take the average, and the average is basically because of the men. And so it's just crazy how scientific research lacks like studies around women. And then not only that, but around their cycles and, the different changes that go on there.
Yeah, it's mind blowing. So if you think about that, like exercise science and sports science, it's like the study of human potential, human physical potential, right? And we don't even include women in those studies. So it's like there was a recent study that showed between 2014 and 2020, only 6% of the studies were done specifically on women's physiology. So, and like you just said, like sometimes there are women sprinkled into the studies, but the applications for women end up completely dissolved out of the study because it's just like worked into an average rather than like actual advice that will help us perform. So like in a way it's exciting, right? Because it's like, oh, actually, like if you think of, we just had a Winter Olympics, like if you watch the things that women are capable of physically, it's absolutely mind-blowing. And then you say, but wait, like all of that, we've done all of that based on training programs designed for men. So like we can be better, right?
Yes, there's a huge opportunity. And so that's the exciting part is like, wow, if we're able to do that now, and maybe the women's bodies are not as healthy, because their cycle might not be occurring or whatever, think about how optimized they could be while they cycle sync and according to their cycle.
Yeah. Or if you think of how like the talent pool, for example. So I think in a lot of sports, like endurance sports, my wheelhouse, right? And in endurance sport, women end up self-selecting into the sport who have like a lower hormone profile, meaning like they may not be as affected by their cycles. Right. Yes. Because, and they fit more into that male model. Right. So then imagine we get it right. Then like the talent pool becomes bigger. Or if we're supporting girls through puberty, and helping them stay in sport, because still 50% of girls drop out of sport, 50% more than the boys that drop out and at puberty. So if we keep those girls in because we know how to support them properly through that phase, then suddenly we have like another whole group of women who will get to the next level, or who could perform at an Olympic level. Yeah,
that'd be amazing. So, okay. So if you were doing athletics basically almost your whole life, when did you start optimizing your body according to, your physiology, and how it operates in regards to that? Like, was there a certain age where it was like, wow, you started learning about this stuff? Did it take like some kind of accident to make it happen? Like, how did that go about?
So I've been retired from pro sports for 5 years, and 5 years ago, we didn't have this information. Right.
Oh,
So
wow.
like, I think Stacey Sims' book Roar came out maybe 7 years ago. And when it first came out, it didn't, like, there weren't that many sales. Like, I didn't hear about it. I didn't hear about it until 5 years
I just
later.
bought it like 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So essentially, like, we didn't know. Like, it was just like this void of like, I would notice, for example, I noticed that I would have poor performances 2 days before my period started, like right at the end of my luteal phase. Yeah. And we just knew through, like, it's like weird. It's like in the olden days, like through word of mouth, like that, and like other, yeah, it's like your grandmother tells you, like
the old wise tradition say.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so I talked to friends about it, and we realized that we had, like, a lot of us would have that same phase where, like, actually we probably shouldn't race on those days right before our period. So we kind of knew that, and then we'd often use like birth control, either an IUD or an oral contraceptive, to try to like change those dates in terms of if we wanted to do a certain event or something. So we had things we were doing, but we were literally like figuring it out in real time, like through trial and error.
Right.
Yeah. Versus like, other things where we'd have dialed, like, carbohydrate recovery and muscle glycogen recovery for the next session, which we like knew exactly what to do and how to optimize.
Yeah. So was it Roar that like really honed you in on that?
Yeah. So we had Stacey on on our Iron Women podcast, maybe, I want to say 4.5 years ago. Right. And that's when I hadn't read Roar yet, but I had heard of it. And I had other friends who were working with her. So at that time, like, she came from cycling and triathlon too. So she was working with a lot of elite athletes. I feel like we kind of found her early. Right. And we brought her into our triathlon summit and had her speak there. And that's when we were like, this is mind blowing. Like, the world has to know about this. Right. Yeah. And Stacey's only one person.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like, that's like the way science works. Like, as we know, is it's like you do a study and then it's kind of disproven or proven to be like sort of true, sort of not true. And it evolves. Right. So we're on the bottom rung.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's cool. That gives me a little context on how it all began and everything. And do you know how it ended up starting within like the women's Olympic soccer team? Because knowing that you love soccer, didn't they start doing more cycle syncing and everything?
Yeah, I think there's another generation that's come up behind Stacey of like women doing PhDs in women specific performance, right? So I think that, like, I don't know specifically with the soccer what the connection was, but I can pretty much guarantee you that, like, if I knew the names, I would know the names. Like, if you follow that, like, it's there's only so many people doing that work, basically. So I think there's, because now we have there's like tracking apps like Wild AI and Fitter Woman, where you can actually like track your cycle.
I do know what Fitter, that I've been that for a while. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it'll boot you out information about how you should train at certain phases. So I'm guessing that they, like, and kudos to them. Like, women's soccer has just been so far ahead of, with their equal pay, with their demands for equal pay, their desire to like, work with their cycles to do training. I think a lot of sports, there's this sense, we even had this in triathlon amongst my peers, like this sense that like, we've always just put our heads down and worked hard and got shit done. And we don't want to pay attention to these like negative, quote unquote, like hormone things that are happening. So like, we don't want that information. I mean, I've heard that a lot. I think it's shifting now, but yeah, kudos to women's soccer for being ahead of the curve on that.
I know when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's crazy. I can't imagine what the program looks like when they're going through it and how they tailor, their diet to it. And it's pretty cool. And Fitter, like I said, Fitter app, for those that are wondering, I'll put it in the show notes. It's really cool because it tells you, these are the different types of foods that you should be eating now, according to, how much you're working out and what that looks like, and the different types of workouts you should be doing. It's really neat because it tailors to like an athletic woman. So
yeah. And not only that, but like, I find with a lot of people like myself now where I'm at, I just kind of work out once a day for an hour or less. I'm very like chill kind of normal, active person. And I don't necessarily want to track my cycle or like benefit from some of those things because I'm not that serious. And I think it's like one of those situations where knowledge is power, even just for the average active woman. So like, even if you don't want to like nutritionally make all these changes or track your cycle and do all that work behind the scenes, you can still, like, if you have an off day, be aware enough to say, oh, this might be my cycle. It's not me. So at least we're not blaming ourselves for like, I'm having a shitty session, I'm not motivated enough. Like we tend to blame ourselves in our brain. So like, wow, I find
I didn't get enough sleep, or I'm just not motivated right now. And I need to get out of that like mindset, which sometimes it may be around that, but a lot of times you don't realize, oh, well, it makes sense. I'm right before my period. So
yeah, exactly. So like, it's just a knowledge thing, right? For a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So what would you say? I mean, I feel like I know what you're going to say with this, but maybe there's some other epiphanies that I don't know about. What would you say the biggest difference, that women should be focused on when it comes to, being different from men? Like, what are those big factors between the two? I mean, cycle is what we continue to talk about. Maybe you just want to elaborate on that. Maybe there are other things as well.
Yeah, definitely knowing your cycle is one of them, as you say. I think like understanding that we need to lift and we need to work on strength from age 30, we start reducing our muscle mass, starts reducing. And if we want to stay strong and healthy for our lives, like it doesn't have to be this like massive thing, right? It can just be like a little strength program to start. And then especially over 50, like after menopause, women just start to like lose their muscle mass really quickly. And like, that's totally different for us. So I think like lifting for sure. I think also understanding that a lot of the diet trends, because a lot of women are like often trying to lose weight, this kind of thing. And a lot of those diet trends like intermittent fasting, paleo, keto, like the studies were not done on women. So we do not know. We have, there's a couple studies now, but we're only starting to know how those diets interact with our hormones. So like if you're doing that kind of, all of those diets include some kind of food restrictions, right? And so if you're like restricting things, somehow you don't feel good and you don't feel energetic, it's probably because it doesn't work for your female physiology. So I just think like being aware of that, like if intermittent fasting is making you feel tired and sluggish and spacey in the head, then like probably it's your hormones. Like, there's a reason it doesn't work for you, and that yet you're hearing all these podcasts and things showing that it should work. It's just because they've ignored us as women.
Right. Have you ever heard of Dr. Mindy? She talks a lot about fasting, and she tailors it a lot to women in menopause and all. She's got a lot of content, and so I'd be curious as to what you think about that, because she seems to tailor it more to women. However, you never know.
Yeah, it's hard to know like how much good information there actually is. You know,
exactly.
Like, I'm sure she means well, but yeah, and those kinds of things, like they work. They like restrictive diets, like they work in the short term.
Yes,
right. I'm just not sure that they're going to work for us.
Or like different times of your cycle. The luteal phase, you might not want to be intermittent fasting. However, like during other times, you might benefit from that intermittent fasting, maybe not a full on like 24-hour fast. But then when it comes to a certain time of your cycle, you're like, why is I'm not getting the same results? And well, the differences in your hormones and the changes there.
Absolutely. And also to recognize that like exercise creates the kind of the same effect as fasting does. So if you're fasting for long periods and exercising on top of it, you're actually like, I know Stacey Sims has some equation with it, but like that 1 hour of exercise is like, I'm just making this up. Do not take this as advice. It's like 3 hours of fasting or whatever. Like, so you need to like, actually, if you're trying to fast for say 14 hours, but you want to exercise, you actually should maybe go to 12 and then do your run, kind of like, that kind of thing. And there's we do know a few things about it.
Yeah, definitely. I would say for anyone that's kind of like, I'm not sure, it's either like get the book Roar or, go to the summit, because Stacey will be speaking there as well, which you'll get loads of information there. Also, I'd highly recommend that for everyone. So walk me through, give me a like brief overview of going through a woman's cycle during the different phases of what nutrition and fitness might look like accordingly for those that are like, whoa, this is a lot. I don't even know like the different cycles. Break it down a little bit for those listening.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in these things, so I can give you.
I will have that disclosure in the end, everyone.
Or tell you what, so my PhD's in history. So
oh wow,
yeah,
clearly you're very on track with this.
But I can't tell you what I know. So like the follicular phase, which starts like the first day of your period, right? And it goes through like kind of like the first 14 to 21 days, depending when you ovulate, like that's when you tend to feel really good. So like one misconception is that we don't feel good, like that we shouldn't do things during our period but that tends like hormonally, at least that is a good phase for us to actually perform or feel good. And those are times that we might respond better to like the things we're talking about, like to intermittent fasting or something like that. We can handle more, we can do more high intensity training. That's a good time to focus on that, like a HIIT training or lifting heavy or setting a PR. So that's the time to like look for that. I know a lot of women struggle around around ovulation too. Like they might have one day that's just off, that's something, and like we don't necessarily
I can recognize that in myself.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You see that one? Yeah.
Yes.
And like, unless you're unless you're an elite athlete or trying to get pregnant, like you may not know when that day is, but if you're having an off day, like 14 to 20 days into your cycle.
I'm in the middle of my cycle. My period was long gone. What the heck?
Yeah, exactly. And then the luteal phase is like the sort of like the back half of the month where like your hormones are slowly decreasing. So you're probably going to associate that with like a sluggish feeling. And that's a good time to do like your longer training or to have more rest. And I think, and also to focus on recovery and having more carbohydrates too at that time.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think we also we underestimate sometimes how much protein we need as women, just in general. So I think it's like, and it works in like both phases, like in every phase of the menstrual cycle, where you need more. If you're going harder during the follicular phase, then you might need more carbohydrate because you're going harder, but then you might need more carbohydrate to recover.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Phase. It's like, okay, both sides here.
Yeah. I always think it's good to just follow like good recovery protocol, like making sure you get carbs and protein in, within, depending on what your workout is, like within 15 minutes to an hour, and then having good balanced meals. You can't go wrong.
Right. What did it look like for you when you were training? Like, what was your favorite time of the cycle where you felt your best? Because, you can optimize every area where you're going to feel really good, but what was your favorite point of the cycle?
Yeah. So I'll give you a story here. I went to Ironman, Texas in 2017, and I just had like the worst race ever. It took me the marathon took me, I think I came 18th out of 25 pro women at a race that I was like fit enough to be top 5,
crush it all. Yeah.
I was like, and I thought I had a place at Ironman Brazil the next week. You usually don't do Ironmans 1 week apart because you have to recover.
Yes, here you are.
Exactly. And so, but then I wasn't, and I said to my partner at the time, I was like, if I get my period in the next couple of days, I'm just going to fly to Brazil, because I knew that everything was going to switch on a dime. So sure enough, 36 hours after the race, I got my period. Like I said earlier, we didn't know to track. We didn't, I just knew. I'm like, ooh, I'm probably in that bad phase.
Like most women, they're like, I feel like I'm going to get my period soon, but really don't know, but feel like it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought, if I get it, I'm going to go. So I got it. I got on the plane. I went, and then I won the race the next week, and I ran an hour faster for the marathon.
Wow. That's insane. I mean, granted, how many miles are you running? 100?
You bike 112 miles. Yeah. And you run a marathon's 26.2 miles.
Okay. Never mind. It was, I knew there was a 100 you were there somewhere.
Yeah. You just
I'm 100 miles. Oh, wow. Shaved an hour. Something.
You're the first person to guess too much. I'm I wish I could run 100 miles. Yeah. No, you can imagine, it's a 4-hour marathon versus a 3-hour marathon. It's literally the difference there. So that to me, I just kind of I wish for everyone coming behind me that like we can know that in advance, and save ourselves the trouble.
100%. And even not even in regards to training, but also in communication abilities. Like women are so much more able to communicate fluently and confidently during certain times of their cycle as well. So it's like, if you're a podcaster, you might be on point more around ovulation, but then, closer to your period, you're just like, I don't want to talk to anybody right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's I find I have more like what I would call bandwidth, like at certain times of month, like that emotional drainage happens faster sometimes than others.
Definitely. So interesting. The last question I have for you, because it's just so cool how you were able to use your cycle to your advantage when it came to training. Like what supplements were you taking to recover? Was there anything specific? Maybe you weren't even focusing on supplements. What did that look like?
Yeah, I'm not a huge supplement person. Like as an endurance athlete, I needed to take iron, but I was definitely like a minimalist in terms of like try to have real foods.
Yes.
And that's just how I rolled. And I still do for the most part. I just don't have to like be so precise about it anymore.
Totally.
So I didn't, again, this is a place where I think with more information, I might've done something differently. So like, I can't really say, because I didn't know what I should have been doing nutritionally to mitigate some of the more negative factors of my cycle.
Right.
And this is what I think we're starting to learn and what we're going to know more and more and more, because it's a perspective thing, right? Like we talk about like PMS, right? It's always this negative, like women get grumpy certain times of months, or even the way that I'm framing it, I'm not culturally totally dissociated from that negative framing of like, oh, I feel off a couple of days a month. But what if there were things we could do like nutritionally or training wise that would kind of like mitigate some of it and actually optimize those days. And so I think those are the things like we're learning and we're going to keep learning.
Totally. I agree 100%. And, there's so many different tests that we can now take as well, genetic testing. I know I've done that and I've been able to realize like, how do I produce estrogen, according to like my body. Granted, like that could be different based on epigenetics, but I produce an okay amount of the good estrogen and then a medium amount of like the bad and a medium amount of like in the middle estrogen. And so one thing I focus on is like flax seeds in my like smoothie or protein shake. And that has really helped to like skyrocket my good estrogen when I take like a Dutch test per se, like a hormone Dutch test. It's so fascinating. And so
that is fascinating.
Yeah. It's really cool how you can like tailor that. And so just really cool things. And like you were saying, it's going to continue to like grow and more knowledge and like in depth of like supplements and how you can tailor accordingly. Yeah. So, okay, there's a lot of content here in education that I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, wow, I have to know more about this because I like to run, I like to train for this. So I want to optimize my body the best I can. And knowing that you have the Women's Performance Summit coming up, what are women going to learn if they were to tune into that?
Right. So this is what we see our place as, is like, just like me, feisty. I'm not an expert on any one thing, but we're going to bring all the experts together and like vet people so that so women are getting good information. So we essentially talk about performance in 4 pillars: physiology, nutrition, mental health, and culture. And we feel really strongly that like you can't separate those things out, like how we feel about our bodies based on the culture that we're living in, or how our mental health is affected by like sport and other messages that we get, like affect the way that we eat, right? Think about ourselves. Like those things are all kind of like intertwined. So we're bringing in experts in those 4 categories, so we can have like a full multidisciplinary like discussion of women's performance. And also we talk about performance through lifetime too. So like we are bringing in people who can talk about puberty and midlife, pregnancy, postpartum, menopause, and beyond, so that everyone has good information. So we've got 20 sessions lined up. Oh, we also have some really amazing, fun, kick-ass main stage speakers. So
awesome.
Yeah, for the main stage, we tend to go with like folks who can inspire or who have really great stories. We've got Amelia Boone who's speaking. Do you know Amelia, the obstacle course racer?
I looked on your webpage. I don't fully know who she is, so give a little context.
Oh, she's fantastic. She's a 4-time world champion in obstacle course racing and in ultra endurance, but she's also like a full-time lawyer. And she's very like openly and publicly struggled with an eating disorder, which I think makes her super relatable to a lot of people.
Oh, totally.
We have Allison Desir, who is the founder of Black Girls Run. And she wrote a book recently.
Cool.
We have Lael Wilcox, who actually she's the first woman to win outright the Trans Am bike race. I love that little bit of like kicking ass and beating the boys thing.
You're like, you're on the lineup.
Yeah, exactly. We have Colonel Yvonne Spencer, who was the first woman and the first African-American to hold certain positions in the Army. And then we also have, Dr. Stacey Sims, of course.
Classic.
Yeah. So I'm so stoked. Like last year we had so much fun.
I bet.
It's gonna be the same this year.
I bet. And what I love too is that it's not all around fitness. And you're getting a lot of amazing content in regards to fitness, but you're tapping into the other 3 pillars, which all 4 of those together are really going to round someone's education when it comes to it. So really cool.
Well, and you can't separate those out. Like, there's still a lot of people who, like women in particular, who don't feel 100% comfortable in like what have been traditionally male spaces at certain gyms or in certain sports. And so I feel like we need to talk about that stuff so that we feel even like comfortable getting in the door before we can talk about physiology and nutrition.
Right. So it sounds like a really amazing group of people where you're going to come and anything's on the table, it's open, and it's a safe environment where you can talk about anything that, women struggle with or are doing amazing in. So that's awesome. And so I was looking a little bit, in regards to like more of what you have to offer. And there's something about like coaches and such, like, what does that look like?
Great question. Yeah. So this year we have we're releasing our first kind of coaches mastermind. So what happened actually after our first Women's Performance Summit last year, we had a lot of coaches, even male coaches, who were interested in how they can coach women better and coming to us like, what's next? And we're like,
let me see here. Let me call my friend.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's the kind of thing where, you've got, like we talked about, like you have the science coming down, you've got folks like Stacey doing the work. And then there's like not that interim of like people taking Stacey's science and passing it along in practical terms to like how you coach a particular sport or how you think about that. So we've created a curriculum and we're going to be running a beta group through it after the summit of coaches, and with the 4 pillars, right? Of like coaches essentially learning from each other how we can get better information about women and to women and coach women better, with view to having like a sort of standardized course that we can run for coaches probably by fall 2022.
Wow. That's awesome. Like you were saying, that the integration aspect or the implementation, I should say, it's like, okay, you can learn all this stuff and now how do we implement? And that'll be huge.
Yeah. Like implementing in a sport specific way. Also, I think like we see a lot of conversation is around the menstrual cycle right now. Right. But like, we're just like, that's not the only thing that affects us as women or the only thing that's different. Right. So let's talk about all these other things and create a more balanced approach.
Awesome. It's like the holistic approach. I love that. So awesome. So how can women sign up for this event? What is the best way to do that?
Right. So the best way to get more information, we're actually posting the schedule this week. I don't know when this podcast is released, but at womensperformance.com.
Amazing.
So yeah,
I will have that in the show notes as well.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. Interesting insight when we went to buy that URL. This just shows you womensperformance.com was $500, right? On like GoDaddy or whatever one of those. Mensperformance.com was like $5,000.
No way. You're like, okay, let's go. Let's knock this out of the park.
Exactly. Like I'm like, I'll take it. Like I'm running a business, but at the same time, like it does show you like the value system that's still clearly in place in our culture.
Totally. Like you were saying, a huge opportunity. The fact, like, eventually this is going to catch up and it'll be like running the same race there, passing up.
Exactly. So head over there. Then you can like find all the links to register. And also we have a Women's Performance podcast too. So that's kind of all linked on that page.
All linked in the show notes as well. I will make sure of that. So give a quick rundown again of what these details of the summit are, like the dates.
We didn't do the dates.
Yes, let's do that.
Yeah, good call. So it's all virtual. I should say that first. So all online, March 25th to 27th. If you can't be there for the whole weekend, or if like sometimes the sessions run congruently, so you don't, or is that the right word, at the same time,
I get you.
You can watch them all later.
Cool.
For up to a year. So you can essentially purchase the all access pass now and like watch it over the course of from March 25th over the course of the next year. But I do recommend coming to the virtual summit because like we do know how to throw a good virtual party.
That's
Feisty.
so fun.
We hang out. There's like the platform we use is called Hopin, and you can go to these like your sponsors and stuff can have like virtual booths, like a virtual expo booth.
Cool.
It's really neat.
What can you expect now?
Totally. Like you can do everything online. You can do speed networking. That's like speed dating in there.
Wow.
But yeah, we have so we have people go to their booths. Like a speaker might have a booth, and then like after their session, they're going in. We're essentially like cocktails in Stacey's booth or whatever. And then we go over there and hang out. Awesome. So for those who do attend and have the time, it really is beneficial to come on the weekend.
Cool. I know I have a friend actually, which is really ironic. She was supposed to record this morning and wasn't feeling the best. And she's actually training for an Ironman. And so then I'm like, and I'm having Sara who has ran Ironmans. How ironic. And so I told her all about this summit and she's super excited. She has something going on that weekend. And I was like, well, don't worry. I'm pretty sure you can purchase so that you can play it all year round.
Amazing.
So, gotcha. Amazing. So before we head into rapid fire questions, are there any few key takeaways that you would love to give to listeners?
Oh, one would be listen to your instincts. I feel like as women, we often don't, or we're taught not to, or when like the science feels wrong, like when someone's telling us this is the way it's done, you're like, something's not right here. It's because it's not right. And because the studies haven't been done on us and the training program you have might not be designed for you. So that's one. And then secondly, I think it's like listening to each other and our stories. Like we talked earlier about my own career, and I didn't, because I didn't have good information. We just learned that from each other. Like we learned how to perform our best Ironman, I learned that from other pro women. So I think listening to other people too, and
you learn so much from other people's stories. It almost can reveal blind spots that you have without even talking to someone, but just hearing their story and then talking through it with them reveals more growth opportunities.
Totally. And that's how change is made too, especially like if someone tells a story and you're like, oh, that's like me too. Oh, wait, maybe it's not us that's wrong. Maybe the world is wrong.
Right. You're like, this makes a lot of sense. We got to do something about this.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Awesome. I love these takeaways, Sara. Now leading into the hardest part of the show, rapid fire questions.
No, I'm nervous. I think you should do some warm up stretches.
Come on now, let's go. The first question I have for you is, what books are you reading right now?
Oh, right now I'm reading Invisible Woman. Do you know that one?
No.
Carolina Criado Perez. I believe that's how you pronounce her name. And it's essentially, she goes through how it's essentially what we were talking about with sports science, but through like design and technology. So like how the world essentially has not been designed for women. So some really good examples are like crash test dummies are like the size of an average man. And so more women get injured and are killed in car crashes because the tests have not been done. Yeah. So I think that's changing now, but partially because of her research. So she brings out some really interesting, she has a whole section about basically about peeing, like, and how
that's
like
crazy.
The world's set up for like men to pee anywhere. It's like
so funny.
Yeah, like just like stuff like that, even like clothing, right? So you think of like someone who's maybe wearing coveralls for their job, right? Like it's not set up like for women to actually be able to like go to the bathroom.
Right. That's so fascinating.
It's crazy stuff like when you start to get into it. So that's it's slow going because I don't have a lot of extra time to read, but I'm really enjoying it.
Cool. That's awesome. I'll put that.
Sorry, that was like the slowest rapid fire ever.
Yeah. Hey, that's okay. That's all right. You can have however much you want. The next question is, what's your favorite food?
Oh, am I going to be boring? The first thing that came to my head was pizza.
Pizza, classic.
Yeah.
Thick or thin crust?
Ooh, thin. I'm also like, I'm celiac. So like a
Oh.
good gluten-free crust, like that is, if I can have a good pizza, it's so amazing.
I stay away from wheat and basically just gluten in general. And so if I have a good quality crust, it's like, it's like, I don't even miss, the regular.
Yeah, it's everything. Or it can be terrible for sure. But I think it's like,
same.
Yeah.
I agree. It's like, it can either be horrible or it can be amazing where you're like, wow, this is so much more improved, or just like cardboard.
Exactly.
What's your definition of intentional living?
Oh man. Okay. I think my definition of intentional living would be essentially like getting centered and aligned around like who you are and what you want to do, and then being willing to make decisions from that place. Right. So like I actually think more people should get comfortable with like chaos. It's like in sport, we talk about being comfortable with discomfort, right? And so what I see, like I coached for a long time Ironman athletes, and like people often want to like schedule themselves, decide what they're going to do. And what they're trying to do is avoid chaos, right? If you can learn to trust yourself and make good decisions aligned with your priorities, then you can like handle that chaos better, because you're going to be able to like work on your feet. So I think like that's my definition of what did you say?
I love that. That's so good. I'm just thinking too, it's like, that'll be your filter then when chaos arises. It'll be simple for you because you're like, well, I know my values, or I know what I stand for. And so whatever comes at me will be filtered through that.
Yes. And you have better skills, like just for like, exactly like a time like COVID, like the people who had worse mental health problems during COVID were folks who were really like stringent and had controlled lives. And a lot of triathletes, a lot of people in my world were in that category of like, get up, swim, go to work.
Right.
Snacks were decided. Everything was, and then when it wasn't, and they couldn't have goals and the races didn't exist, people started to struggle. And so I think if you can like trust yourself, like, okay, I know that like it's in my value system to exercise every day. My priorities with that are are feeling good. That's the first priority, right? Of my long-term health. Like that's a priority. Then you can make a decision about what you're going to do.
Definitely. That's so good. I love that so much. What's your favorite travel destination or a dream destination you have?
Well, I'm used to going to Hawaii every year because the Ironman World Championships are there in Kona. Yeah, and I've missed the last 2 years, so I basically like cried my Kona coffee every morning about it.
Don't remind me.
So yeah, I went there every year probably for 15 or even 20 years until COVID. So I missed that trip.
I can only imagine. I mean, when you're doing that every year for that long, it's like, what is my life?
Yeah, exactly.
But then you're like, okay, I got to tap into my values, and I know now.
Right.
Like tap into my intentional living, and
exactly.
Amazing. And the last part is, how can listeners connect with you, Sara? And I'll have everything in regards to the summit, but what's the best method for you?
Sure. I still love Instagram. I also love TikTok, but we mostly do it for our business. But yeah, on Instagram, I'm just at Sara.Gross. You can find me there. And for Feisty Media, it's like at Feisty_media. That's what we are on Instagram.
Perfect. Awesome. Like I said, that'll be in the show notes for everyone. Sara, thank you so much for coming on. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, April. It's been so fun.